Good day. Today I'm wearing a silk and I got a nice strap here because I've got very important news for you. The news is this new podcast called What Economists Are Missing, Keeping You Poorer. This podcast is the work of a team of researchers, and three of them, I got their picture here. The topics on this podcast are supported by a book, What Economists Are Missing, Keeping You Poorer. This book is a product of about 150 years of research and practice in accounting and economics. Please order it at Apple or Amazon. And I've got a link here which you can also use. Now, the reason why economies struggle is due to the drag by their technocrats. It's not the politicians. Very often, everybody blames politicians for poor economies. But if you look very carefully, you realize that actually there is a layer below the politician which is not easily read. And that layer is where the problem is. That layer is with technocrats. That's where this team of people we call technocrats are. And technocrats retard economies by sticking to two rules of their own. One is that governments should not provide or advance capital to start any business, such as factories. They say each person must start the business from his or her own pocket. The second one is that economies provide no mechanism for countries to raise own capital. They say countries must attract foreign investors, and there is this term fixed direct foreign investments. Now, in poor countries, of course, there are no capital. There's no capital. Coupled with few foreign investors, countries struggle to develop. So let's start with capital. Capital is your own money, that which you raise. The message is that countries can raise only capital collectively using technology, such as the mobile phones or the betting industry. Capital does not come from foreign investors. Capital is not taxes. The difference between East and West is mainly capital availability. We circulated the proposal on how to raise capital to over 100 countries. Only Argentina and Russia responded. Here is a link of an extract of the BRICS submission. We use South Africa in this podcast as an example, as a reference point, because this great Mandela country has good policies and can be a strategic world leader, except for the sluggish economy, which can be traced to the drag by technocrats on the policy implementation. The number one cause of poor economic performance is that the technocrats are not listening or playing to countries' policy. Every president wants his or her country to succeed. Presidents sign laws and engage in bilateral agreements with other countries. Yes, eventually politicians defend their turfs, but they are responding to the pressures of the day. While nations blame politicians for poor economic development and the suffering of their population, the real underlying cause of poor economies is within the offices of the technocrats. And we shall explain step by step how they impede economic progress while in pursuit of Western European protocols. The message to millions of you in the world is that you are poorer because of what economists are missing. As detailed in the book, You are not necessarily poor in the true sense, but you are below what you could have been. This episode 1 is directed at various regions and countries of the world, such as African countries. South Africa is one of them. Niger, Mali, Senegal, Ghana, Egypt, Ethiopia, Sudan, Algeria, Central African Republic, Cameroon, Ivory Coast, Zimbabwe, and many others. They must raise their own capital instead of waiting for foreign investors. Eastern Europe is in the same mold. They are in Europe, but on the East they don't have a capital. And these are countries like Poland, Russia, Georgia, Armenia, Maldives, Romania, Estonia, Bosnia, Bulgaria, Hungary, Croatia, Ukraine, and so forth. These nations' citizens migrate to western parts of EU and Britain, where there is more capital. And we can find the same scenario in Asian countries, in Iran, Arabia, Yemen, Philippines, Vietnam, Thailand, Myanmar, Pakistan, Afghanistan, India, Malaysia, Jordan, Tajikistan, Syria, Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan, Iraq, Kuwait, and so forth. The citizens of these regions are migrating to EU countries and Britain. South America has a similar problem, such as Brazil, Argentina, Colombia, Peru, Chile, El Salvador, Venezuela, Ecuador, Nicaragua, Honduras, Panama, Caribbean islands such as Cuba, Haiti, and so forth. The citizens of these regions migrated to the USA because in these regions there's no capital. All these countries and regions should raise their own capital. It is the failure of economic advice that they receive which leads them to failing to raise capital. And instead they wait in vain for foreign investors, leading to stagnant growth which deepens poverty and eventually triggers instability and all manner of social ills. In Haiti, for example, there is chaos. The economy hasn't grown for such a long time that the governance has collapsed. We started this podcast because mainstream media refuse to cover the notion that technocrats could be misleading governments. Media can change things. I listened to many interviews where the presenter or interviewer led the discussions. If journalists understand a topic in a particular way, the debate sways that direction. Therefore, our national discourse is limited to the extent of the knowledge of the journalist on that topic. Media sets the national ceiling of economic discourse. We are not, however, blaming the media or anybody. We are focusing on what nations might not fully appreciate. And that is the nature of research. Upon gaining political power, politicians dropped the ball, thinking they have arrived. They do not realize that the next stage should be raising capital. This must be done soon after liberation or liberalization for countries where there was no struggle for freedom. Raising capital internally is the most crucial step and is very easy. Unfortunately, politicians sit back and listen to the technocrats who advise them to attract foreign investors. Instead of raising capitals for citizens to undertake new business ventures to increase gross domestic product and overall country prosperity. So we are faced here with technocrats. Who are technocrats? Technocrats are highly educated citizens employed by governments or industry. These are men and women with letters. They call them letters, certificates from various universities. And if your certificate from Harvard, you're very popular. Everybody wants to employ you. And they listen to graduates from such universities. Technocrats occupy positions just below the ministers and command the operations of government and industry. Let me repeat, they are highly educated and employed in government or industry, and they hold key positions in government. They've got skills, they've got knowledge, and technocrats are indispensable because governments and industry cannot operate without them. Government, therefore, rely on their technocrats. So if there's a problem, we leave the politician and don't see that he gets his advice from his team of technocrats. They are the same throughout the world. Technocrats study the same texts of research materials at master's and doctorate degrees, and usually the content comes largely from Ivy League universities. Technocrats include engineers, economists, accountants, professors of various topics. That ilk of knowledge. They sit at all round tables where economic plans for government or industry are discussed. The extent of their knowledge determines how far a country can go in terms of development. In other words, the ceiling is what the technocrat knows. Politicians have got their own skills for mobilizing and public relations, but they rarely fulfill what they promise to the electorate because they have to cross the path of the technocrats. Then the technocrats say, no, this is done like this or like that. Then they tell the politicians what is possible and how to do it. And the politicians do not claim to know these technical skills. They employ the people who know. So the economy is not growing. Robots and street lights are not working. Sewage drains are blocked. In some areas, there's none at all, particularly in Africa and Southern America. Hospitals are deteriorating. Educational institutions are decaying. Roads are not maintained and full of potholes. The value of the currency is falling and budgets are cut while the technocrats are there in their offices, some in suits and ties surrounding the politicians. Everybody blames the politicians. To some extent, they are right. People vote for politicians and want progress. And the countries have replaced their governments. But in those cases, GDP remains stagnant. This is because the problem is not at the top, but just below at the technocratic level. A typical technocrat is a highly educated professional. And it can be a director general, it can be a permanent secretary, it can be called a director, it can be a presidential, ministerial advisor, or some kind of primero, commanding respect. Is a boss, a chef of many workers in a department. A typical technocrat can be described as an accounting officer, a bureaucrat, authoritative, feared, and tell the minister and the president what is possible. Technocrats are highly paid. They drive the best cars and fly around with the president and ministers of government. So their understanding of poverty could be completely diminished. A typical technocrat does not respond to incoming proposals or messages or emails or complaints. A technocrat does not respond to people or institutions he feels are less academic than him or her, or communications from people who do not threaten his or her livelihood or a job. And technocrats like to be linked to some universities where they get their letters. Financial technocrats want to be associated with the World Bank, IMF, Paris Club, and all institutions of money. Some technocrats facilitate corruption, massive white collar crime. Because politicians do not have signatures at the bank accounts of government. It is the technocrats with such signatures. When citizens complain that government is not responding, it is the technocrats who do not respond. This lack of response is a huge problem. The ministers and the president and industry do not know what is submitted to the officials until the relevant DG or official bring it to the attention. The technocrat is the person who is charged with relaying information to ministers, organizes and writes the ministers' or president's speeches, tells the president where to go and when, within the modalities of the protocols. And technocrats are also very busy professionals, such as the DG, one who communicates with the minister and the president. Communication with the minister and the president pass through one or two individuals. A typical technocrat rarely holds media briefings, but in the background, advising the minister or the president what to say and providing content. In all countries, the president and minister's emails or phone numbers are private and are not accessible to members of the public, even when the contact numbers or email are listed in the directory or website. Only a small ring of technocrats have access to the president and the ministers. The rest of the citizens are closed out, and the ministers and the president are seen on TV, but not in their offices, and are accessible only through the DG or to some extent the personal assistant. To develop a country needs everybody to raise the capital internally, to capacitate citizens. A country is developed by its citizens, whatever their situation, such as low education, poor national endowment, lack of capital, small or big populations. Solutions must be found. Countries which cry that they have no money must rethink the way forward. We see the face of poverty in Africa and some parts of Asia and South America because they have no capital. But capital is organized and there are many sources. The next episode will explain how to raise capital and effectively for individual and industrial use, such as agricultural, mining, and all programs. Please follow this podcast. Buy the book, What Economists Are Missing, which keep me informed. Share the podcast, subscribe and follow. See you in episode 2 as we explain further on this topic. Thank you.